Marshall Boy here, bass player for Tethra, and today we're going to have a multi-scale shootout between Legator and Ormsby. But first, here's a quick backstory. I went online and saw an ad for Legator guitars that said 50% off. So, naturally, being the thrifty shopper that I am, I went through and took a look. And I ended up ordering 2 Legator models. 10 days later, I opened a box of the first one that had arrived. The second one was a pre-order for a model that was not yet available, and I never even got to see that one because I canceled that order, because what I saw when I opened that box was a train wreck. If you were in any of the guitar forums back then, you may remember it. They made a meme about it, so that's neat. His name was Marshall Boy, they said. But when I opened this box, the first thing that jumped out at me was that everything was terrible, and it didn't get any better from there. The guitar that I received looked like it had been sitting on a showroom floor, or where everybody and their sick kids can play it. It was all dented up, it was scratched. The bridge was rusty and dirty and filthy and gross. I picked it up out of the box, and I was with a coworker at the time because I had it delivered to work, and I strummed all 6 strings, and as soon as I did, the high E snapped. Okay, that happens sometimes, but upon further inspection, that happened because the 0 fret, which they had installed on that model, was notched. The strings actually cut a notch into the fret, and it was like that for 3 strings on that fret. So I started looking at the frets, and several of them were lifted, and they were terrible. They were lifted out. I could sit there with my finger and continue to pull the fret out. It looked like it had been hammered with a 5-pound sledge. It was gross. There were chips taken out of the neck in the stripes in the wood. Very large chips, not just, oh, that's a small little indentation. A legitimate chunk was taken out. All of the hardware was mangled, and not just dirty, but like the kind of dirt that you only get from time of playing without being cleaned. And I was under the assumption that I had purchased a brand new guitar. And whenever I contacted them, they assured me that this was a brand new guitar. It was not something sitting around a showroom or lent out to somebody, but they were so convinced that it was a brand new guitar, and I could not believe it. It was a bolt-on neck model, and all the screws that were holding it together were rusted, and they were actually chipped. Like this thing had been taken apart several times and had buckle rash. The back of the guitar had grooves and cuts in it through the clear where I could see bare wood. And this was not from shipping. There's no way shipping could have done all of this. This guitar left the factory that way. And on the headstock, where the 5-piece neck, all the pieces were laminated together, there were glue marks where they had filled in space and gaps in the wood with glue, and it ended up being right where they cut the headstock. And it was the whole thickness of the headstock with this big nasty mark. And you could see maple, glue, and I believe what was rosewood for the other stripe. It was terrible. As soon as I pulled this guitar out of the box and saw all these flaws, I immediately messaged them through Facebook. This is what I said. So I just received my Ninja 200, and it's riddled with QC issues, and it's obviously a refurbished model. There's tons of scratches, the bridge is already showing signs of corrosion, the 0 fret is lifted and looks like it was a botched repair job, same with the nut. The headstock and neck are all glossed, scratched and dirty like it's a demo model that has been played heavily. I'm completely disappointed with this guitar. They replied back, "Hey Marshall, we talked with the company owner, and we can either let you hold on to the one you've got right now and ship out a replacement next month when the shipment comes in, or we can send you a return shipping label so you can ship it back for a refund and get a new one for the discounted pricing when they come in." That was unacceptable to me because I had just purchased a guitar. Why should I wait another month with no promise that this next guitar would be any better? It didn't seem like this was something that was out of the ordinary. So I continued further. I asked, "Is the new one going to be as flawed as this one?" And this is where things get good. They replied, "We voiced our concerns about the QC to our factory, and their defect rate has been decreasing steadily, though it is still present." They knew this was happening, and they were sending these out. In good conscience, they were sending out these garbage guitars and just hoping that people wouldn't respond and complain. Now, they continue to say, we can definitely give you the pick of the litter when they get in, but until we get them in front of us, we don't know how much the production has improved. So they were not only sending out guitars that were flawed and doing so purposefully, they didn't know if the next batch were going to be any better, and yet they continue to send them out. The only other option they gave me was to wait a month and get the same model guitar that could be better. It could be the same, it could be worse. They didn't know, they couldn't tell me. Or they wanted to charge me an upcharge to go to the next higher model, which they reassured me that that one will be fine. They have no problems with that one, but I had to pay full price to make the jump up in quality tier. That's where I drew the line. A good company would stand behind their product, and if they were putting out junk guitars, they would just give you the upgrade for nothing because they screwed up. And that's when I went to the internet to show them for what they are. They were junk guitars. So after a year and a half of constantly being in the forums and discouraging everybody from buying a Legator guitar, they reached out to me and they wanted to send me one to do a review, and they were very confident that all of these problems have been resolved and that their guitars are now of the highest quality, and I will be blown away. And this is what we are here today to find out. Here we have the Legator Ninja CS series, Multiscale 7-string. It has a paddock top, paddock fretboard, ash body, and wenge and maple 5-piece neck. Stainless steel jumbo frets, 24 frets with offset markers, Fishman Fluence modern pickups, single volume knob, 3-position pickup selector switch, and a kill switch. It has the Legator single saddle bridge. It has Legator locking tuners and a matching paddock veneer on the top, and an abalone inlay for the logo. All in all, this is a very visually striking guitar, especially with the bevels here. It is very comfortable, and it's very thin, especially right here where the bevels meet. Almost reminds me of an Ibanez S series right here. It is a bolt-on neck also. Output jack in the bottom. The fretwork on it is nice. There's nothing sticking out or jabbing. They're not hidden, but it's comfortable. The fretwork looks good, all the fret ends. Everything's top notch there. The bridge itself has these pointed ends, and it looks kind of neat, but I think the plan for it was to hold your hand from sliding back. It gives you like a nice point of reference. It just stops you right there. I can see how that would come into play. It's comfortable. There's no real issues with it. It has a graphite nut, thin U-shaped neck, and it's very thin. Very comfortable though. I love the wenge neck on it. It feels very smooth and fast, but it does have some flaws. It's hard to tell from far away, but you get up close and it has issues. Most are cosmetic, but it is not a perfect guitar. The bridge itself, you can see all the single saddles, they're not all the same height. 3 of them are high, 3 of them are low, and they're not alternating or anything like that, so that seems like it's just a flaw. You get to the back of the guitar, all the ferrules here are chipped out. They're blown out from the factory, and there's even some hot glue or some sort of, it looks like hot glue where they glued one in, but there's big chips taken out of the back of all of them. There's also a big chip taken out in the input jack. I didn't see any wood filler glue this time like on my first Legator endeavor, so that's a good sign. But I did notice on the back of the body it's very open grained, and they didn't sand it down perfectly smooth, which might be a personal preference or aesthetic kind of choice they made, but I don't quite like it. Especially in some of the areas, it seems like it got chipped out when it was CNC'd. It's very rough, especially in some areas back here. There's deep gouges that your fingernail catches, which is not what you want on such an expensive guitar. There's also very, very distinct CNC marks on the heel that probably should have been sanded out. There's marks on the horns on the inside where it seemed like
it just didn't get sanded down smooth. You can still see all the tooling marks. Actually, it's the whole way around the body. You can see all the tooling marks. Then you get up towards the headstock, and the Legator logo, it looks like the abalone inlay either cracked or it was mislaid, and there's a very definitive gap between the two pieces of abalone and the T in Legator, where if you're trying to make a name for yourself in quality, maybe you should at least get your name right on the logo. Truss rod cover looks to be ash, just like the body. Then you come to the cavity cover. Now the cavity cover, it just feels cheap. It's rough, very rough compared to the body. Like you can hear the difference. And it's sticking up, smooth sticking up. It's all over the place. I feel like even a piece of plastic would have been better, but it is what it is. There's some space in the neck joint, but nothing too crazy. A little bit of a gap, but no real problems there. The pickup routes are pretty smooth. No complaints there. That all looks good. It is a very good looking guitar and a very good playing guitar. It's just, after all this time talking about stepping up their quality control issues, you think they would have fixed some of these minor problems that really take away from a very nice guitar, especially with a price point so high, especially when looking at all the comparable brands and models out there that wouldn't have some of these very small issues that shouldn't be overlooked whenever you're trying, especially when you're trying to rebrand yourself as a quality guitar manufacturer. Another issue I have, which might be a pet peeve of mine regarding the Legator, is that for such a nice playing guitar, besides telling you that it's a Legator, nowhere on the guitar does it tell you what model it is. So if you were out playing somebody's or in a music shop and you pick this up and you wanted to find information about it online, you don't know what model it is. It should say Ninja CS series somewhere, maybe the truss rod cover, maybe on the back of the headstock, but nowhere on the guitar does it tell you what it is, other than that it's a Legator. Here we have the Ormsby SX Shark GTR. What we have is a quilt maple top in the Ocean Dream finish, mahogany body, 5-piece flame maple neck with ebony stripes, an ebony cap on the headstock, cream binding on the headstock, the neck and fretboard, and the body. It is also a semi-hollow with a shark cut out for the F-hole. We got humbucker, single coil, tone, push-pull for coil split, volume, 3-way pickup selector, single piece bridge made by Hipshot. Then we have Ormsby locking tuners up top and a bone nut. We also have the input jack hidden in kind of a goofy little spot that is actually quite comfortable when you're playing. We have a hot rod A8 and an Apex A5. We have jumbo stainless steel frets. The inlays are sharks and a 29 fretboard. Now, this guitar is amazing. It plays well, it sounds amazing, and it is just so visually striking. But there are some issues with it as well. If you look at the pickup routing for this single coil, it looks kinda janky. You've got a little bit of a jagged edge here, especially up towards the neck. If you get a good look down here, it just looks like it could have been finished a little bit better there. But other than that, this is a flawless guitar. The neck is a little bit thicker. It's a thin U, but it's just a little bit thicker than the Legator. The Legator was very, very thin. This one's a little bit thicker, and it sounds amazing. Here, as you can see, all the ferrules in there, nicely drilled, no blowouts. They're even recessed a little bit. And in the input jack, no blowouts either. And the difference, this is gloss finish, whereas the Legator was satin, so everything is smooth and you don't have any of that issue with sanding to get down to smoothness with the open grain in the Legator. This has an ebony fretboard, and the scale length for the 7-string model is 25.5 to 27.8 inches.
as opposed to the Legator scale, which is 25.5 to 27.
Here we have the Legator in the bridge position. Next, we'll do the middle pickup selection. Lastly, the neck pickup.
All right.
We have the SX Shark in the bridge position. Middle position. And lastly, neck position. All right, Legator clean in the bridge position. Switching her into middle position. And finally, neck position. Alright, we have the Ormsby SX Shark in the bridge position. Switching it to the middle position. And lastly, the neck position.
Alright, so when it comes down to brass tacks, we have a couple different categories that we'll break them down into. First off is playability. They both play spectacularly. This neck is a little bit thicker, which I honestly don't mind. The Legator is a little bit thinner, so it's nice for playing leads. It's fast, there's no doubt about it. But if I had to choose, I honestly couldn't. I love them both. They're even. The playability for the neck, they're both comfortable bridges. The setups on them are great. Intonation on both of them, perfect out of the box. Haven't had any issues since. So they're tied in playability. Now we get to sound. We have the Fishman's versus Ormsby's hand-wound pickups. These are passive, these are active. So we have a slight difference there. They both sound great. I'm honestly more of a passive pickup guy, but it doesn't mean that the actives in the Legator are bad. That's a personal preference. They're both great. There's no doubt about it. So I'm gonna leave that down to personal preference. They both sound amazing. So we're gonna have them tied in that category as well. The third category is going to be build quality. Now, when you look at these two, they both look great from here. But whenever you really start getting up to them and seeing all the details, where they should really shine, especially for being this tier of instrument. They both have flaws, but the flaws on the Legator are there's just too many of them. And the Ormsby, the couple little minor flaws, they're nothing in comparison to all of the things that got overlooked on this Legator. So we get down to the next category, price. The Ormsby was roughly, depending on the exchange rate between the Australian dollar and the American dollar, between $1,600 and $1,700. The Legator is $2,100. So there's a big price gap there. So when it comes down to overall value, all of the little tiny issues with the Legator compared to the one minor issue on the Ormsby, and the Ormsby is cheaper, kind of makes up your mind for yourself. Saving almost $500 on an instrument here that is of the same tier as this one. And honestly, I just can't get enough of both of these necks. Between the flame maple and the Wenge with the maple stripes, that really sets both of these guitars off. But at the end of the day, the issues with the Legator take it out of the running, and I'm going to be going with Ormsby here. So another aspect that differs between the two is the Ormsby is a much more versatile instrument. Being that it's a semi-hollow, the tonal possibilities are just endless, especially with the split coil tap there. This thing sounds great playing country, strumming clean, or when you start throwing some distortion on it, it keeps up. There's no doubt about it. Whereas Legator, it's a metal guitar. It's meant to be overdriven and play mean, nasty riffs with, which that's fine if that's what you're going for. But the price point and the difference between them, the Ormsby is a much finer instrument with extreme attention to detail that the Legator is lacking. And I'm honestly sad that Legator isn't where I wish they were. When they contacted me and said that they were going to send me one to do a review of, they were very confident that all of their issues were taken care of. I didn't have any ill will towards them. I wanted them to fix everything because I like their body shapes, I like their designs, they look great. It's just a matter of a newer company that has had a troubled past getting through and starting to put out quality instruments. And I was hoping that that's what this was. And while this is leaps and bounds, we're in a different solar system than the first guitar that I ever got from Legator. It's still not where it should be, especially for the price point. And that's where I'll leave you. Legator, not as bad as before, but not as good as they could be. So keep working on it, and if you keep making all the right changes like it seems like you have in the last few years from the last one I touched, you might have something good going for you, but you gotta pay attention to all these small, minor details whenever you're trying to push a guitar for over $2,000. So, not so much back to the drawing board, but keep working, you'll get it.